Okay, so we left off last time where we have some pretty sweet player damage animations, and we have a progress bar that now starts with a full bar of health, goes down to 0, but then at the end of it our player just disappears and the game's just over. And that's kind of boring, so we're going to refine that a little bit. And one of the first things that's lacking in our game right now that stands out really to me, that's present in almost any other game you're going to play, is most times you'll have some extra lives. So we need to start setting up a framework so that we can give our players some extra lives. So what we need first before we do anything else for that is we need a global variable to hold the value of those extra lives. Or in other words, to keep track of how many extra lives we have left. So I'm going to create a new global variable, and I'll go through that process with you again since I didn't explain it as I was doing it. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add another variable with next to this green globe thing, and that's going to create a new global variable dialog box, and in that box I'm going to call my variable lives, and it's going to be a number, and the initial value will set to 3. We'll start with 3 extra lives. So we'll do that. And then down here, the next few actions that we're going to create are going to be all under the condition that health has gone down to 0 and that the player has died at least once. So what we want to do is we want to check and see if there are any lives left. So what we do is I'm going to add a sub event there. So meaning this is all going to happen. These next conditions are only going to get checked if the player has died. So if the player's died once, we're going to check if the system has any lives left. So if we go back, we start with system. I'll go back again. We start at system, then we're going to compare a global variable, and the global variable we're going to compare is lives, and we're going to see if that is great or less than or equal to 0. So I'm going to click done there, and that's my sub event. And if my lives are less than or equal to 0, I'm going to do one set of actions, and I'm going to do a completely different set of actions under the condition that I have some extra lives left. So I want to add a second sub event, system, and I'm going to compare that global variable lives again, but this time I'm going to say as long as my extra lives is, or the value of my extra lives is greater than 0, I'm going to do something else. And I actually want the greater than 0 to happen second and the less than or equal to 0 to happen first. So before we get into that though, if I have more than 0 lives, so if I have at least 1 life left, what I want to do is have the system create, and I'll search for that, create a new object, and we're going to create a player object. We're going to create that one on layer 1, which is our main layer. Now the X position should be a random point anywhere on our game board. So my layout size is actually I think at this point it's 2000 is what we set it to. So I'm going to create a random number that can be anywhere from 1 to or 0 to 2000, and that will take care of. So my the X coordinate of the player that I'm going to create is going to be anywhere between 0, which is way over here to the left, and 2000, which is way over here to the right. So it can be anywhere this way or that way. And we also want it to be anywhere vertically as well. So on the Y coordinate, I'm going to create another random number between 0 and 1000, since that's the vertical width of the layout. So now I'm picking, so basically my X and Y coordinates, I'm going to place a new player object at a certain set of coordinates, X and Y coordinates, that are random numbers that could be anywhere on the game layout. So I'm going to do that. And then also, when I'm creating a new player, remember that we added that tint before, and that the default position of tint is to be enabled, which means our players will come out red unless I disable them as I'm creating the player object. So since I'm creating a new player object here, I also have to disable that tint. So I'll go to set effect enabled. I'll make sure it's set to disabled. I'll make sure I'm on tint. So I'm disabling tint. And then the other thing I want to do, since I created an object here, I'm using a live. So I got to extract one or subtract one from live. So I'll grab that global variable. I'll go subtract one from the variable lives. So then I'm doing those three things as I have extra lives. The other thing I'm going to do is if the lives are greater than 0 or less than or equal to 0, I'm actually going to wait 2 seconds. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to say 2 seconds, and then I'm going to create a text box that says game over. So now I have to insert one of those into the layout. So I'm going to go ahead and insert new object, text, and I'm going to drag that onto the layout. It'll be over here. And that text is going to read game over. And I'm going to set it to that same chiller font that we've been using for a while. I'm going to make it really big. Since it's a game over thing, I'm going to make it a big piece of text. And you can see I can't see it in this little window because I got to make this guy bigger. And I'm going to get it just big enough so that the game over doesn't disappear. And I also want to change the color to something a little reddish. So that looks pretty good. And I got to change some alignment settings because I don't really like how that looks. So horizontal, everything should be centered up is what I want to do. So all my alignments are going to be centered. And so then, while lives are less than or equal to 0, meaning the game's pretty much over, I've used up all my extra life, I'm going to first wait 2 seconds, and then I'm going to create an object, and I'm going to use that game over object. Here, hang on 1 second. Let's find out why that's not showing up. So it says text here, and I want to actually call that game over. So let's try that again. If I have 0 lives left, I'm going to have the system create a new object, and it's going to be the game over object. And I'm going to create that on layer 2, which is my HUD layer. And I will create it at a certain set of coordinates. Now, what I would like to do is put those coordinates in the middle of the window. So I want that game over to show up right in the middle. And the way I do that is whatever my window is, and there's actually a variable for that. Window width would be the X coordinate. And I want to go divided by 2. So I'll give you the philosophy behind dividing that by 2. If I go from 0 to the entire width of my layout, that would put me somewhere over here on the far right. If I wanted to be right in the middle, I would start from 0 and go over to the right half that. So that's where the divided by 2 comes from. Same thing vertically. If I wanted to start from the top and go all the way down to the bottom, that would be window height. But if I just wanted to go halfway down so I could be right in the middle, that would be window height divided by 2. So this should put that text box right in the middle of our screen on layer 2, which is our HUD layer. And so if I run the layout now, I'll pause this video for a second until I get close to the end, and then I can show you the end game here with our player. Okay, and as you can see here, the journey is almost over with our player here. He's on his last life and our health is almost gone. One more time here. And then it should wait 2 seconds, and then the game over screen comes up. But that's a little disappointing. That's not exactly where I wanted the game over, so let's figure out what happened. Now before I go any further in the troubleshooting process, I don't really want to wait till I have to kill my player 4 times and waste all the lives in order to check this condition. So what I'm going to do is temporarily move that action up to the on start of layout, so that I can check it right away when the layout starts. Now, the thing is with this, the variables that I put in here are going to return absolute numbers, because the width of the window that I look through when I'm playing the game is 1000 by 500. And that's an absolute number. So if I put in this X something that is a solid number like 500, and it's going to go to 500 on the coordinates of the layout. It's not going to go to 500 on the coordinates of the viewport that I'm looking through. So I have to use a different variable than window width, and I didn't know that on the outstart. What I have to do is use viewport. So I'm going to start at the top of the viewport, which is the current window that I'm looking through as I'm playing the game. So actually I'm going to start when I'm going with the X coordinate is left to right. So I'm going to start with the far left, viewport left, and I'm going to, since I know that my window size when I'm playing the game is 1000 by 500, to get to the middle, all I have to do is start from the far left and go right 500. And then I'm also going to, since I know if I go into my layout and I click on the let's go ahead and cancel this for just a second. If I go into the layout here and I click on the game over sign, I know that it's 316 by 122. So if I start at viewport left, I go 500, I go to the right 500 to put me in the middle, and then I go back half of the width, which is 158, to compensate for half of the size of my text, right? So I want to make sure that the middle of the viewport is in the middle of my text, so everything's lined up in the center. And then I go from the top of the viewport top for my Y coordinate, and I go down half of the size of the viewport, which is 250, and then I subtract half of the height of my text to compensate, so that again the middle of my text is lining up with the middle of the viewport. And this is 122, so that would be minus 61. Whoops. Minus 61 there, and I click done. Then it gives me this wrong number of parameters error. And actually, when you use the viewport keyword, it asks you for a parameter, which is the layer that you want to add these things on. And I want to add it on layer 2, which is the HUD. So if I do that and I click done, then I play again, and on the start of the layout, I have my game over there right smack dab in the middle. So all I have to do is move that down to, if I get down to 0 lives, I wait 2 seconds, I die, and then I create the game over screen.